needs no introduction, but here it is anyways. Phil Lollar is an American voice actor, a director, a producer, and a writer. He's the co-creator of Adventures in Odyssey, and he's written over 200 episodes and directed more than 300 of those. He has worked on Jungle Jam and Friends, the radio show, Paws and Tails, and Kids Corner, and so much more. He's a passionate purveyor of great stories well told, and he's been doing it for his entire life. He has literally reinvented the art of radio drama. And I'm grateful to say that Phil is someone I know in real life, so I'll add this to his bio. I'm going to say that Phil is the possessor of some fantastic headwear. He is often wearing a great hat, and he has an unmatched passion for teaching. He's actually Professor Lawler, passing on his knowledge and craft to the next generation. He has a mentor's heart and a hero's faith, and I'm blessed to know him. So, Phil, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. That is an incredibly kind introduction. Wow, I'm flattered and honored to be here. This is wonderful. Thank you. I'm so glad that you've been inspired to do this. This is great. I love these kinds of conversations. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Phil, when I think of you, I think of someone who is faithfully creative. You have honed and developed your craft of writing and storytelling. And not only that, you've done it in a way where you invite others to explore the craft with you. And I've seen that you possess this profound combination of seeing people in all their humanity without judgment, without shame, and seeing their value as one made in the image of God, and also seeing where they could be in light of that. It's this amazing combination, and it comes across in the stories that you tell. And so, really, when I think of someone who's amazingly real and amazingly humble and amazingly creative, I think of you.
Oh, wow. I'm not going to be able to walk out of this room. My head's going to be so big.
I love
Well, again,
it.
thank you very much. I mean, what I would say to that is that as a storyteller, you try to look at humanity in all its aspects. You
Hmm.
want your characters and the people that you're writing about, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, to be as real and relatable to the people, the listeners, the watchers, the readers as possible. And so to do that, it requires understanding the nature of story and the nature of storytelling, and then also the idea that we are all in a story.
Hmm.
We're all taking part in a story. We all are the protagonists of our own story. We're also supporting characters in other people's stories. That's the way we are designed. That's who we are. And so it really behooves us to understand what story is and how story works. And when you do that, when you start thinking in those ways,
Hmm.
you start seeing people in a different light. And so you start hopefully you start seeing them as creations,
Hmm.
and creations that are made in the image of God, and that like you as a creation, you also need help. You need help. You're not perfect. You're gonna make mistakes, and sometimes big ones, huge ones, and it's dealing with those mistakes that gives us the fodder for stories and life itself.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I believe we have so much to learn from the idea of story, which is
Mhm.
why I wanted to have this conversation with you. That those principles of storytelling that you're alluding to can help us become better communicators and better mentors and better humans. And I know you teach entire college level length courses on story, but could you give us the short synopsis, the storytelling for dummies synopsis on that?
Well, when I started doing this, when I started to go back to school, I'd worked on Adventures in Odyssey and a lot of other projects for a long time, and I went to my wife and I said, you know what, I need a new skill set. I
Mm,
think I'm kind of at the end of where I know what I know, and so I need a new skill set. And so I decided to go back to school, and I did. I went back to college and decided to really delve into studying the art of storytelling and the craft of storytelling, and the I even want to say the science of storytelling,
mhm,
because there is one, if kind of.
mhm,
But that required doing a kind of a deep dive into history, a deep dive into philosophy, and realizing that these principles have been around forever. These
Mhm.
principles have been around ever since the beginning. In the beginning, God created
Mhm.
the heavens and the earth. Well, that's a story. That's the start of a story. That's the start of time. As
Mhm.
soon as time starts, story starts.
Mm.
That's basically what it is. And and then you jump ahead, in time, and you get to a guy named Aristotle. And Aristotle really understood. He wrote about everything. Aristotle wrote about everything, including art. And he wrote a book called the Poetics. It's a short book. It's not very big, but it is rich in how it describes exactly what story is. And
Mhm.
he has six elements of what story is.
Mhm.
And I said, six is too many. Let me narrow it down a little bit. So
I love it.
I get it down to four,
Okay.
but one of them has two elements to it. So
Mhm.
basically, it's plot, character, then what I call communication, which
Mhm.
involves dialogue and presentation,
Mhm.
and then theme. And the presentation part is what Aristotle used to call song and spectacle. So I took all that together and said, you know what, that's really just the presentation. That's how we present stories.
Mhm.
The rest of them are fairly close to what Aristotle said, and so then it just became a matter of, okay, well, what does that mean?
Mhm.
How does that work? What is a plot?
Mhm.
Who are characters, and what do they say? How are they supposed to talk? That's dialogue. And what are these stories about? What is your life about? And that's your
Mhm.
theme.
Mhm.
Plot is the order of incidents, how things work. It goes from here to here to here to here. But not necessarily going from here to here to here to here. He talked about beginning, middle, and end, but it might be that you start in the middle and then you go
Mhm.
back and tell the beginning.
Mhm.
And then he talked about character, and there were multiple aspects of character. Um, uh, uh, Character are the agents through which the plot is told, basically.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and then how do they do that? They do that through dialogue. They do that through movement, dialogue, visual and verbal communication and cues.
Mhm.
And then again, the why theme is the why. What is the story about? What is your life about? What is this individual story about? And that gets into a lot of other things like symbolism and
Mhm.
literary illusion and things like that. And then presentation for us in the modern world, that's what media are you using? How
Mhm.
how are you? Is it a play? Is it a book? Is it a television show, an audio drama, a movie?
Mhm.
What is it that you're actually doing? So that, I mean, in a nutshell, that's basically those are the elements
Oh.
of story. And so if you're going to talk about it in terms of personality, in terms of, you can talk about it in terms of writing a story, but you can
Mhm.
also talk about that in terms of your life.
Yeah.
What's your plot? Where are you in your plot?
Mm.
How's it going? How's that plot going? How's your character? How's your dialogue? How is all that working? What's your theme right now? What, in this part of the story, what theme are you dealing with?
Mm.
There are multiple ones, and you can deal with a lot of them. So, I mean, that's how I look at it.
Mhm.
That's how I kind of try to look at life as a story. And I think it's really important to look at life that way, because it's important for you to remember where you are
Mhm.
in the story. A
Yeah.
lot of times people feel like they are caught up in a problem they can't get out of.
Mhm.
But because we're in stories, the nature of the story is you're never static in a story. You're never just in one place. You're never in a place where you can't get out of the problem, out
Mhm.
of the situation. You just need to be patient, because something is always happening in a story. Something next is always happening in a story. And so, I mean, even if you just look at your own life, you could be living, going through real hardships, but you realize, okay, wait a minute, I went through that hardship.
Mhm.
Oh, something else happened. What happened?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so if you analyze yourself that way, your life that way, you can see, oh, story is great. Story is
Mhm.
wonderful. So
Mhm.
because if you're stuck in a rut, think about what happens next. Where
Mhm.
where are you at? You're writing this story with the creator of the universe.
Mhm.
I don't think he's finished with anybody. He's still writing the story. So,
And he writes good stories.
he does. He loves cliffhangers.
Yes.
He loves cliffhangers. Boy, but he just loves cliffhangers, and that's another aspect of a story that we all, especially as it relates to life. Good
Mhm.
grief, I'm at the edge of my rope. I don't know what else to do. I can't. What are we going to do? How is this going to happen?
Mm.
Okay, you know what? Guess what?
Yeah.
There's a salvation aspect of it.
Yes.
Um, go for it.
Yeah.
Let go. I think that was it. Was it, how did that joke go? There was a guy who was walking along a precipice. He was walking along the edge, and he slipped and fell, and he fell down into the to this off this precipice, and
Hmm.
he grabbed a hold of a branch, and he was looking down. There's 1,000 foot drop below. He's looking up above. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Hanging on for dear life, and he calls out and says, "If there's anybody up there, if there's anybody up there, show me the way. Give me faith.
Yeah.
How do I have faith? Show me how to do this." And a voice from heaven calls down and says, "If you really have faith, let go." And the man looks up and says, "Is there anybody else up there that I can talk to?"
Yes.
That's us most of the time. That's us most of the time.
What's your second
So,
piece of advice?
yeah, exactly.
Well,
But
as I'm hearing you talk about these elements, I'm thinking how it would be so helpful. Like, let's say that I'm in a sticky relationship with
Mhm,
someone, then I can think, well, what's the theme of this? Going
exactly.
into a meeting, what's the theme? What's the current plot? What's the story arc that I'd like it to be?
Yeah,
And just think
yeah.
of those elements of story that you're teaching us and apply it to my relationship.
When I was in grad school, I had a professor who taught writing, and I had two professors. One was just he understood this stuff so well, and he just lived it. It was really, really wonderful. And part of the to understand the story, part of the elements of storytelling is that we talk about is usually stories are told in three acts. You have Act One, which is the setup of the story. You have Act Two, which is complications and conflicts. I call it conflications. You
Mm.
blend them together. It's
Hmm.
rising and falling action. It's the messy middle is what
Hmm.
basically where you're at. And that
Hmm.
rises to a climax that leads you to Act Three, which is the resolution of your story, which leads to the next story. Okay,
Hmm.
um, so my professors, one of them was going through a really, really bad time, a terrible time in his private life,
Hmm.
and his wife was leaving him, and he didn't get tenure like he wanted, and his wife was leaving him, and it was just a
All
bad
the
situation
things.
for him. He was walking down the hallway at the university, and he was looking really, really sad, and he ran into this other professor who really knew this stuff really well, and so Professor One, Professor Two said, "Hey, what's going on with you? You don't look too good." And the
Hmm.
first professor said, "Well, my life has fallen apart. Well, let's go get some coffee. We'll talk about it."
Mm.
Okay. So they went out, got some coffee. They conversed. The first professor told all the problems to the second professor. The second professor looked at him and said, "Well, don't you get it?" And he said, "What do you mean?" He
Mm.
said, You're just at the end of Act Two.
Mm.
You're just at the end of Act Two. That's all. You got a whole third act waiting for you here." And the first professor said, "It just that blew my mind. That
Yeah.
completely blew my mind." Yeah, he's absolutely right. This is
Hmm.
obstacles. This is I got a goal. This is obstacles. I'm being faced with bad stuff.
Yeah.
This is a false victory or a false defeat that I'm going through here. That's part of story as well.
Hmm.
And I got a whole nother act to go through here. So I can't just give up. I can't just. And he said it just totally changed the way he looks at everything now. Where are you? Where are you in that? Are you in the
Yes.
setup? Are you in the complication part, the messy middle, or are
Hmm.
you in the resolution part? Are you getting to the
Hmm.
resolution? Bear in mind, the resolution means a new story is going to start. There's a new story
Hmm.
on the horizon. The end of one story is the beginning of another story. That's why we have these stories. That's the way we're designed. That's what goes on,
Yeah. Yeah. Not all stories stand the test of time.
right?
What makes a story catch our interest at the time and then stick afterwards?
I think that what really helps a story stand the test of time. A lot of times stories will not be so another variation on that is a story will not be accepted in its time, and it's only later that
Uh,
becomes this great, wonderful classic
mm-hmm.
story.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of books that came out and they were just not books or movies or television, that didn't they came out that were not very well received.
Not
They didn't
received
get a whole
well.
lot of publicity. They weren't very popular at the time. But then later, the next generation comes along that says, "Wow, this is great. We really like this stuff. This really speaks to us."
Mm.
Usually, and I think pretty much always, what what makes a story stand the test of time is it's as how it speaks to the human condition.
Hmm.
They're general, they're undeniable, intrinsic truths about the human condition that we all uh, deal with, and that certain elements of modern society want to try to take away,
Hmm.
want to pretend aren't happening.
Hmm.
But people over the years have realized that's not true. We can't just reduce everything to science and matter.
Hmm.
There's more to it than that. There are questions that science can't answer.
Hmm.
There are questions that science can't answer. Science responds to that by saying, yeah, but they're not worth those questions are not worth asking.
Hmm.
That's the way they say
Hmm.
it's not worth asking. But you can't just steamroller over these questions. These are still questions that everybody faces, everybody deals with.
For sure.
Why is there something rather than nothing?
Hmm.
Why are we here? What
Hmm.
what are we supposed to be doing?
Hmm.
Surely it's not just to discover you know matter.
Hmm.
uh, what do you do with those things that are not explainable by scientific methodology? What do you do with
Hmm.
that? How do you how
Hmm.
do you deal with how do you deal with it's such a inadequate response to say, well, it's just C fibers firing in your brain when you love somebody, having an emotional reaction to something. It's such a lame response to say that. There must be more to it than that. There's a certain quality to those feelings, those events, those experiences, those emotions. That's it. By the way, uh, I'm also, in addition to having an MFA in script writing and whatnot, I also have degrees in philosophy. So those are my two loves. I used to do both of those. So that's the reason I lapse into these long philosophical discussions occasionally. But there is this thing in philosophy called qualia. It's the qualia argument. It's the idea of there's more to things than just the materialist, the physicality of it,
Hmm.
um, of how we operate. Everything cannot be reduced to mere scientific methodology. There has, and in fact, scientific methodology, science, when it tries to answer why questions, usually fails dramatically. And so they just
Hmm.
ignore the why. They
Hmm.
would much rather deal with the how. It's interesting. As a matter of fact, I saw a clip just recently. Ricky Gervais, the comedian, is a
Hmm.
well-known atheist,
Hmm.
and he's very vocal about it. And he
Hmm.
was on with one of the late night talk show hosts, um, who was asking him about this.
Hmm.
And the host asked him that question. Why are we here? Why? Uh, and Gervais actually responded with, well, surely the more important question is how.
Hmm.
you know, and I was like, and the host didn't follow up. It didn't follow through. And then he gave him his platform to be able to talk about the how and why. How
Hmm.
the scientism is what it's called. It's not scientists. It's not science. It's scientism.
Hmm.
Scientism says the only way to answer any question is through the scientific method.
Hmm.
Okay, but that in and of itself is not a scientific response to science to
Hmm.
scientism. That's a philosophical question. That's a
Hmm.
that's a truth claim. That's not a science claim.
Hmm.
So but I thought, well, don't just you can't just steamroller over that, Ricky. You can't just wipe that under the carpet. You can't just you want to, I know.
Hmm.
For you don't think that's a very interesting question, but for most of humanity, it's an extraordinarily interesting question. It's a vital question.
Yeah.
I think
Why?
COVID actually brought a lot of this home. For me, it was a glaring example of science saying the most important thing in life is existence.
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
exist. And I said, surely we're made for more than just mere existence.
Hmm.
Surely there are more important things than just merely existing.
Hmm.
Uh, uh,
Hmm.
that was something that I really thought about a lot, and
Yeah.
during COVID,
Hmm.
story
Hmm.
gives us that. Story gives us the ability to um, examine all of those kinds of things within a narrative framework.
Hmm. The
You know, and
freedom and the space to ask why and
yeah,
to
to
ask
ask the
what
why
if.
question. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
It's extremely important to ask the why questions. Why?
Hmm.
But a lot of Christians are afraid sometimes to ask the why questions, but the why. I think we're sometimes afraid to answer the why questions because the answer is not always forthcoming.
Yeah, yeah. So
You know?
can you talk about that? Like
Yeah.
how what does it look like for a Christian to ask why? Because I join you in believing that we can ask any question.
I,
So what does it look like for a Christian to ask why? And how might
I'm
that actually make our faith stronger?
yeah, I'm really fascinated by like some of the people who would not necessarily identify as Christian, but are really examining the um, Christianity, like Jordan Peterson and
They're the
folks like
ones
that.
asking why for us because we've
They're the
forgotten
one.
how
Well,
to
they're
ask it.
doing they're doing our work for us. They
Yeah.
really are. This is our book. You know,
Hmm.
the Bible
Hmm.
is our book, and
Hmm.
they're the ones who are asking the questions about that and doing the deep dives in the book to say there's more to it. By the way, you have this great book here that, and there's so much more to it than you realize. You need to not be afraid
Hmm.
to do that. But um, one of the things that he's doing is he's got this tour, I think, or that he's speaking tour or this seminar or something he's doing, and it's called "We Who Wrestle with God."
Mm.
And of course that's what Israel means. You know,
Hmm.
that's the name Israel is, you know,
Yeah.
wrestles with, contends with God. Contends with
Yes.
God is what the name Israel means, which means it's not that we're not supposed to.
Hmm.
You know, we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to be asking the questions. We're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Uh, that doesn't mean we're always going to get the answers.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that we're always going to get them. But we should understand that just because we don't get the answers does not mean there's not a purpose.
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean, and especially means that just because we don't get the answers doesn't mean that um, that this bad thing that we're going through, this why, you know, that we're asking in light of a horrible situation, doesn't have some ultimate good to it.
Hmm. Hmm.
We don't see it, and we may never see it. We may not ever see it, but that idea provides us with a lot of hope,
Hmm.
I think, and that's what we really are looking for here is hope. Um, I've written a lot of scripts. This has been the subject matter of several Odyssey scripts that I've been writing lately. Is the idea of the nature of God. I think we look at God the wrong way.
Mm.
This is another thing that when you go deeper into it, you start looking at the literature, you start looking at church fathers, and you start looking at the things that they grappled with.
Hmm.
All of this stuff they grappled with a long time, thousands of years before we ever came along. But the idea behind it is thinking of God in the right way, thinking of God
Hmm.
as we want to think of God as the most powerful being in the universe. Okay.
Hmm.
But if he's a being, that means he's like us.
Hmm.
Okay, so what we're really saying then is okay, that God is a being like we are, just the most powerful being.
Hmm.
But that's not what God is. I don't think that's a good way of looking at
Mm.
God. And a lot of the church fathers didn't either. What they would look at is say God is actually being itself.
Mm.
God is the reason everything exists. God the Father is a reason everything exists.
Yeah.
And so because of that, he doesn't see time.
Hmm.
He sees it all as one whole.
Hmm.
He sees everything is happening at the same time, past, present, future, all of it at the same time.
Yeah.
So we can't know what's going on, right? We're in the midst of this story, this linear story, and we
Hmm.
see this terrible thing happening. And, oh my goodness, how horrible. And if there's a just God, why? But he sees the whole picture at the same time. He knows all of
Hmm.
it, all of
Yes.
it. And so he knows much more deeply than we know exactly why things are
Hmm.
happening the way they're happening.
Yeah.
Um, and of course his creation is evident everywhere. This is what Scripture tells us. His creation is evident everywhere,
Hmm.
uh, and so you know the heavens declare the glory of God. So those are a lot of things that I'm working on. But a character named Renee
Hmm.
is asking these questions in Odyssey, and so she's marching down this path, and it's what I love about characters like that. That's a thing about character creation. If you can create a character like that, you get to talk about this stuff. You know,
Hmm.
most of the
Hmm.
time, he wants to talk about this stuff, but you get to talk about it when you create a
And you
character.
get to puzzle through those
Yeah,
same
yeah.
questions.
Yeah, you get
Yeah,
to,
for
and
sure.
hopefully you've written the conversation in such a way that it makes people go, I never thought about that before. I really want to hear more about this. Where do I go to get more
Hmm.
about this situation?
Hmm.
Makes them
Yeah.
start thinking about it a little bit
Yeah.
more. So that's
Yeah.
always a good thing.
And that's what makes a story stick, is that it
Yeah,
asks
yeah,
those big questions.
yeah, yeah. I think so. I think so. I think, you look at something like the Lord of the Rings, and you see all of the amazing and enduring, eternal,
Mhm.
why questions, the values, and the struggling, the grappling with, um, the human condition, even though, even though humans are only one one character in there,
Yes.
one type of character in there, but they all grapple with these things. Am I doing the right thing? Sacrifice. I mean,
Hmm.
Gandalf sacrificed for them at the bridge. All of
Hmm.
these kinds of things. Aragorn is a great character in the films. He's not. It's not so much the way in the books, but in the film, it's great because he thinks he's inherited this horrible streak in
Hmm.
him, and he's afraid to take charge. He's afraid to do what he was born to do, which was be the king. He's
Hmm.
afraid to do that because if I do, I'll become a tyrant.
Yeah.
All of my ancestors were tyrants, and so I must be that way too. I must be a tyrant.
Yeah.
And so, he has to go through this journey. He has to go through this this horrible, terrible, difficult thing where his life is threatened so many times, and he's about to have uh, big problems,
Crisis.
and
Yeah.
maybe even die in
Hmm.
crises, and his life is threatened. In order to understand that, in order to
Hmm.
understand that, wait a minute, hold on, this is who you were meant to be. This is
Hmm.
they need you right now. You were meant to be the leader. You were born to be
Hmm.
the leader. It's in your blood. Take it, go for it, do it.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. And you see him
um,
embracing that. Is
yeah,
is Aragorn your favorite character in the Lord of the Rings stories?
I don't know that I have. I think Sam is my favorite character in Lord of the Rings. I
Yes.
love Sam. He's such a great character. I think that portion of the story is about. I think Sam is.
Sam is absolutely the hero.
I think he's the main character.
Hmm.
I think it's all about.
Yeah.
I think it's not all about Sam, but Sam is. He goes through so much,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you realize that he learns so much.
Hmm.
And he goes along with the quest, but
Yeah.
he's such a great supportive character,
Yes.
he's
Uh,
he's
yes.
just this wonderful. I love that moment where I want to hear more about Sam. He's the great character, not Frodo, not this. Frodo wouldn't have done anything if it hadn't been for Sam. I
Yes.
think that's just absolutely spot on.
One of the
It's
best.
who we're supposed to be. That's who we're
Hmm.
supposed to be.
Hmm. Hmm.
In life. That's how we're supposed to help each other in life. Sam is
Yeah.
totally devoted to service.
Hmm.
Sam loves like God loves, which is
Hmm.
willing the good of the other. He's all about willing other people's good. Even when he's against Gollum,
Hmm.
he recognizes evil for what it is.
Hmm.
You can see Frodo's misplaced compassion,
Hmm. Yeah.
in all of that. Um, but Sam recognizes all that through and through, and I mean, he still gives Gollum a chance. He still gives Gollum a chance, but he understands, no, this guy has sold his soul.
Yeah.
It's gone. It's too late. It's
Yeah.
too late for him. People really hate that when you do that with characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
They, they
Yeah.
really don't like it. Christians especially really don't like
That
the
makes
idea of an
sense.
unredeemable character. They don't like it
Yeah.
at all. So,
Yes. Yes. We've been reading The Lord of the Rings with our kids,
mhm.
and my favorite thing about Sam that I had missed until this reading is when they are in Lothlorien for the first
Mhm.
time and Galadriel gives them gifts, she gives Sam a box of elvish earth. And
Ah,
it's just this little tiny box that and she says, when you get back to the Shire, you can plant the most beautiful garden with this
yes,
dirt. And so
yes,
he carries it, through Mordor, through the bogs, through the mountains. Like he always has this piece of hope with him.
yeah,
And
yeah.
he keeps it with him all the way to the end through everything that he encounters. And I think it just sums up who Sam is.
Yeah, yeah, and that,
Yeah.
of course, that great speech, that there's good in this world, and
Hmm.
it's worth
It's worth
fighting for.
fighting for. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
I
now
love
you
it.
that it's like, oh, you get teary-eyed just thinking
Yes.
about that.
Yes.
So
Like sign
good.
me up for that one right there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. And that's another good thing that stories do for us. One of the things that Lewis says about Eustace in the Chronicles of Narnia, the character of Eustace,
Hmm.
is that, first of all, it's the best line, the best opening line of all the Chronicles of
Give
Narnia,
it
and
to
perhaps
us.
in
We got
literature
to hear it.
is there was once a boy named Eustace Scrub, and he almost deserved it, which is just the best line. I love
It
that.
is.
That's such a great line. But one of the things he says about Eustace is, that he read a lot of books, but he didn't read the right books. He
Hmm.
wasn't reading the right books. He could tell you all about the time schedules for trains, and he could tell you about shipping, and he could tell you about legalese and governments and stuff like that. But he couldn't tell you about humanity. He couldn't tell you
Yeah.
about about how to look at how to recognize the signs. He couldn't tell
Mm-hmm.
you about how to recognize the signs.
Yeah.
And I think that that's true with a lot of people these days, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that's what's great about Sam too. And you know that he's like he read the right books, he heard the right stories, he read the
Yes.
right books, you
Yes.
know. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to do that as well. We need to all be able to read the right books
Mm-hmm.
and recognize what's truly important.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the how you do this and you know how this you use this chemical to do this and make this. Those are important
Mm-hmm.
things. I'm not trying
Mm-hmm.
to deny that those aren't important, but much better is how do you read the signs? How do you know what's
Mm-hmm.
going on around you? How do you
Mm-hmm.
really know things
Mm-hmm.
that are happening.
Yeah.
Um, Peter, I think, in one of the early books, maybe it's in Prince Caspian, talks about. I don't remember if it's in that one or maybe even the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But he said they got to get someplace. They got to go someplace, and they don't know which way to go. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's actually Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He says the robins are singing, and they're going
Mm.
in a certain direction. They're flying in a certain direction. And he says, well, in every book I've ever read, the robins, you follow the robins, you get to good things.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah.
but essentially
Yeah.
that's what he's saying. So you follow the robins, and you're going to get to the right place, and so they do, and they do,
Uh-huh.
you know. And so
Yeah.
but I think it's in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe because I
He
think
was reading
Edmund
the
then
right
says,
books.
Edmund says, well, how do we know we can trust the robins? How do we know we can do any of that? And he says, well, in every book I've read,
Mm-hmm.
robins, you follow the robins that lead you to the right place. And
I
so
love it.
it's like that's a great example
Yes.
of this sort of thing, you know.
Yes.
Symbolically, it's a great example. Are you
Mm-hmm.
reading the right books? Can you recognize the sign of the times? Can you
Mm-hmm.
recognize what's going on? Where can you recognize where we are in the story? You got to read the right books. You got to know the
Mm-hmm.
signs.
Mm-hmm. And ask those big questions.
Yeah.
I hear you talking about like really defining, well, asking those big questions of God.
Hmm.
And then as I'm hearing you, I start thinking about like how can we create relationships where we can also include other people in that conversation, where we're maybe asking other people those big questions or joining with them in that conversation. So,
Yeah.
so what, from your perspective, like if we're gonna enter into a relationship with someone and we want it to be resilient,
Hmm.
what in your writing, in your life, what does having a resilient relationship look like for you?
I think resiliency is a matter of two things, and they're both related. And I'll be the first one to say that while I can tell you this intellectually, I'm terrible at practicing it.
Let's practice with the saying it
Yeah.
part.
But we'll go for it. The first thing is service,
Hmm.
serving others, being of service.
Hmm.
I love quoting Star Trek and Star Trek: The Next Generation. That's one of my favorite things to do. I grew up on the original series and loved it, and I've watched them all until recently when they've gone way off the rails. But I love the original series. But I used to watch The Next Generation. Spock's father,
Hmm.
if you know, is Sarek. This is
Hmm.
Spock's father, and at one point on The Next Generation, it's just a small thing that happens, but then it struck me in a really profound way when I saw it. They're beamed aboard the Enterprise. He's an ambassador, so he's gonna negotiate some sort of deal with everybody. They
Hmm.
beamed aboard the Enterprise, and Picard and everybody's there saying, "Welcome aboard." And the first thing out of Sarek's mouth is, "We come to serve.
Hmm.
We come to serve." And I
Hmm.
used to think, well, that's a fun line.
He's just saying
When I first started, that's a fun
it.
line. The
Yeah.
writers came up with something. And then I realized, after a while, wow, you can't get any better of greeting than that. That should be
Hmm.
our first thing. That should be the first thing in any kind of situation that we're in any kind of new situation that we're in any kind of existing situation that we're in. How can I serve? How can I
Hmm.
help?
Hmm.
What do you need? What do you need from me? Can I help you in any way, shape, or how? How?
Hmm.
And this and it gets really neglected in the relationships that you have, the day-to-day relationships that you have, the
Yeah.
ones that are really close to you, the people, your husbands, wives, your spouses and children and whatnot.
Hmm.
That's where it can get really neglected because you're around them all the time.
Hmm.
And you're wondering why they can't serve you for a little while. Why can't and you think, wow, that's where it all falls down.
Hmm.
And when that happens, you need the second part, which is I mentioned it before, which is love, loving as God
Hmm.
loves, which is willing the good of the other.
Willing the good of the other.
Willing the good of the other. It's we say love, and our society looks at love as something completely different. There are, the Greeks had all those words for love, different love.
Mhm.
And usually what we talk about when we think of love is this romantic feeling,
Mhm.
this, or not even a romantic feeling, just a really good feeling toward another person.
Mhm.
And that can be part of it, sure, but that's not what love really is. Love, the deep love, is willing the good of the other. And how do I make that happen?
Mhm.
How do I make that happen? That's the service part of it. I want what's good for you. I want the best for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best for you is going to mean that I'm going to have to say things that you're not going to like. You're not
Mhm.
going to hear. You're going to hear things that I'm going to say that you're not going to like.
Mhm.
But it's what is best is what you need to hear.
Mhm.
And that's much more difficult when you're on the receiving end of that than when
Isn't
you're
it
on the
though?
giving end of it. Oh yeah. But you stop and think about it. I mean, if you come across somebody who's sitting in a burning house,
Mhm.
you're not going to tell them, oh, it's okay, do what you want. It's okay, you be
I'm over
you.
here if you need anything.
Yeah, I'm over here for anything. You be you.
Yeah.
It's all right. No,
Yeah.
you're going to tell them, get out of that house, and you're going to
Mhm.
go in and you're going to drag them out of that house. And is not that an act of service?
Yes.
Is not that an act of loving them, willing their best for them, willing what's best
Mhm.
for them,
Mhm.
because you want them to thrive, you want them to live. Now that action on the outside, from the outside, can look mean. It can look hard.
Mhm.
It can look harsh. It can look,
Mhm.
terrible. You're physically dragging somebody out. Yeah, but what was the alternative?
Mhm. Yeah.
What what was it? Well, the burning house metaphor is an old metaphor, and we know it. But don't we face that every day? Don't we face
Absolutely.
that all the time?
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
don't these situations, if you really examine our lives, don't these situations pop up every single day, every single time?
Mhm. Mhm.
We go out to do anything, we have this situation, usually where somebody's trying to do something that we know is really bad, or bad for
Mhm.
them, or bad for everybody else, bad for the society. And you think, no, let's stop
Yeah.
that. Don't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So
I'm thinking about like if I imagine and in an hour my kiddos are going to walk in the door and if I
yeah,
just stopped and thought what would willing the good of this son look like
yeah,
as I'm ready to serve him, what does it look like to will the
yeah,
good of this person right here
yeah.
and
And
ask the question.
it doesn't have to be a big thing.
Right.
So in other words, it doesn't have to be a profound, life-shaking, earth-shattering, oh my goodness, you've rocked my world thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be something very small.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What do you need what do you need right now? What is it that I'm perceiving that you need right now? I'll just do that for you.
Yeah,
And you don't have to
absolutely.
make a big deal out of it. It's
Mm.
not, see, the minute you start thinking about you in the situation,
Then you're not.
that's where it goes away.
Yeah.
So a lot of times Lewis talked about being surprised by joy. He talked
Hmm.
about the nature of joy. And he said joy is something that you experience, and while you're experiencing it, as soon as you realize that you're experiencing it, it's gone. And there's no way to
Mm-hmm.
capture it.
Hmm.
There's no way to actually physically you can put yourself in the same situation doing the same thing, and there's no way to capture it. But
Hmm.
authentic true joy, a moment of true joy, is something that you're in the moment, and the minute you recognize that you're in the moment, joy, it's gone. It vanishes.
Yeah.
And I think that service is kind of the same way.
Mm.
Authentic service, you're in the moment. You're just you're let's go back to Aristotle again. Aristotle said you have to practice these things.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So if you're not sure if you're serving somebody, well, go ahead and practice serving.
Hmm.
Practice just willing the good of the other. Go for an hour,
Hmm.
where I'm going to be just totally ready to serve and ready to do what's good for other people, no matter what kind of response I get. No
Yeah.
matter what kind of response I get.
Hmm.
Because the first thing that people are going to do is look at you like you're crazy.
Hmm.
You're going to be crazy. Oh, and so last year my wife broke her arm.
Mm.
She's a horsewoman. She has a horse, and she was standing in the wrong spot, and the horse
Oh
got spooked and kicked her
no.
basically all the way across the round pin. Boom.
Oh
And it kicked her in
man.
the arm and it broke her arm. So she couldn't do all of the things that, taking care of a horse requires a lot of physical stuff.
For
And
sure.
her thing is the animals. That we've understood that, we have this understanding. That's your thing, not my
Yes.
thing. That's your thing.
Yes.
But she couldn't do it. So I
Mm.
thought, okay, well, I'm going to go. I'm going to help her.
Mm.
and at first it's like, I'm gonna go help her.
I suppose.
Uh, I guess, it's what I'm supposed to do. So
Yeah.
you go over there, and I thought, well, let me see if I can't practice this a little bit,
Mm.
because I
Hmm.
was thinking about this a lot. And I thought, let me see how that would work. So I went in, and as we got there, I said, what is the dirtiest, most awful job that you have when
Mm.
you're taking care of your horse? Shell, mucking out the stall,
Hmm.
taking horse poop out there,
Yeah.
putting it in a pile. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
I'll do that. Really? I said, yeah. Okay, just tell me what you want me to use, tools, and I'll do that every time. So every time, 2 times a day, boom, over there, mucking out the
Hmm.
stalls. You know, and then okay, got that done. Now what? What's the next dirtiest thing? Well, doing this, doing that. I said, okay,
Hmm.
I'll take those. I'll take on those dirty, awful, rotten jobs
Hmm.
now, and see if I can't even do. And it was unbelievable. It was stunning because just doing that, suddenly it was like I wanted to do that.
Mm.
I went from, well, okay, I'll do it, to, hey, let's get over there and do this. What else can I
Mm.
do? What else? It feeds off. What else can I do? What else can I do? Can I
Yeah.
help? Can I help other people? Can I sweep up the whole barn? Can I do, you know, and I don't, I mean, I don't say that to sound braggy or, I was really trying to step out of myself and
Hmm.
observe the situation just to see what it was
Yeah.
like, to see
Yeah.
what was going on. It was profound. It was
Yeah.
unbelievably profound. If you
And
do
then you
that
were
and you
surprised by joy.
exactly surprised by joy, surprised by
Yeah.
service, willing the
Hmm.
good of the other,
Hmm.
and just saying, it was stunning at how it grows.
Hmm.
It builds off of itself. It just
Hmm.
grows and grows
Hmm.
and grows and grows, and
Yeah.
pretty soon you're doing these awful, terrible things, but when you go into it with that kind of attitude, you go into it with
Hmm.
that kind of a response. It's like, wow, this is
Yeah.
this is life changing. This is
Hmm.
really life changing. And if you've never done that, highly recommend it.
Hmm.
Go put
Hmm.
yourself in that kind of a situation where you're really just saying, okay, I'm gonna take on the worst job that I can find here in this. I'll do that.
Yeah.
And I'll do it with a smile. I'll do it with joy in my heart. I'll
Yep.
just do it.
Hmm.
We'll see.
See what happens. I
See
love
what
it.
happens. See what happens.
Yeah.
I guarantee you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Phil, one of the things that you address in your introductory writing classes is the
Mhm.
importance of knowing your characters. Can
Yeah.
you tell us the things that every good character must have?
Yeah, so there are a lot. Well, there are a lot. That covers a lot of territory.
It does.
A good character, a good character, of course, needs to have. When I say know your character, you
Hmm.
need to understand your character's background.
Mm.
That's called the interior life.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, the interior life, which is from birth to the moment your story starts. So you
Okay.
should know everything there is to know about your character. Now, there
Hmm.
are a lot of people who say, "No, I don't want to know everything there is to know. I
Yeah.
want to discover that as I go along."
Hmm.
Okay, I mean, you could try that. That's fine.
Hmm.
I think it's better to know it,
Hmm.
and then discover what your character will do in the exterior life, which is, excuse me, from the moment that your story starts to its resolution. Okay, so
Mm.
you have to put your character into a situation, and then all that background comes into play in that situation, and then how are they going to respond to all the obstacles and everything that you're setting up for them that are going to happen and going to rise organically from the needs of your story. So
Hmm.
you need to understand that background. You need to understand who that character is, and that's everything from the physical sciencey part of things
Hmm.
to the metaphysical. What do they believe? What are
Hmm.
their what are their what are their what is their like? What is their life inside like?
Yeah.
Um,
And
there
as
are
you're
Yeah.
as you're answering these questions, I'm just thinking about how many amazing applications there are to someone in a discipleship relationship
Oh
or
yeah.
a mentoring relationship. If I take those questions, okay, what's their background and how did they get to be where they are, even from a physical perspective or metaphysical, like, and then I take those questions to that conversation, it's
Yeah.
gonna be such a better conversation. Thank you for letting me interrupt. Go, keep
No,
going more.
no. See, that's
Yeah.
real, that shows that how life is story. That's how
Yes.
you apply these principles of story to life.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times, in a real situation like that, with other people, they're not going to want to tell you their background,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
but you should wonder what that is. You
Mm-hmm.
should. You
Bring a
should,
curiosity to
and you
it.
should give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe the reason they're behaving like they're behaving is because of something that's going on that
Mm-hmm.
you don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so then you're starting now though from this story, which is the exterior. We're meeting together and we're going from here forward. Hopefully, some of that stuff will come out in the story that we're now living through.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's one thing. Know your character's background, know your character's identity, who they are, that
Yeah.
their family situation, what they look like, if
Mm-hmm.
they have any traumas that happened in their life. Physically, do they have all four functioning limbs? Are they, do they have any
Yeah.
scars? Do they have any tattoos? Do they have any whatever? How all that works. You want to know as much about that as possible. Then you want to, then there are what I call the aspects of character, the 8 aspects of character, which is point of view. Everybody, this is where it gets into more interior. This is
Sure.
where it gets into the more stuff that goes to the metaphysical part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's point of view. Point of view is everybody has a character. Everybody has a point of view. We all have a worldview, a point of view in which we look at things. We look at everything is filtered through that point of view. So give your characters point of view. The second is attitude.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way. That's their response to things. Their internal response to things. The way they look at life and how they want to behave, and how what are their real desires.
Okay.
That's where attitude comes in. Then you have personality, which is how they present themselves to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Are they charming? Are they this? Are they that? Then there's behavior, and behavior is how they actually act. This
Mm.
is how they. So you can have a lot of stuff going inside, but behavior is the way they actually act. This is what
So
they
then
actually do.
attitude is internal and then behavior is that
Is
expressed.
that the difference between attitude and behavior
Mm-hmm.
is that behavior behavior can be changed by external responses. They can
Got it.
behave. So let's say attitude. Let's say your attitude is I like driving my car any speed that I want to drive it.
Yes.
And I don't care about stoplights and I don't care about stop signs and I don't care about speed limits. I'm going to do what I want. I like
Mm-hmm.
I like driving. And that then shows up in your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So you drive your car that way. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you get pulled over and you get a ticket, you
Mm-hmm.
know, or arrested.
Yes.
You go to jail,
Yes.
and then you get out and you say, I don't really care. I'm going to do it anyway. And you do it again. Well, if you get enough tickets or you go to
Mm-hmm.
jail enough, you're probably going to say, okay, I can't afford to do this
It's not worth
anymore. And
it.
I don't really want to go to jail anymore. And, so you're going to change your behavior. External
Mm-hmm.
forces have changed your behavior. Now, you may still want to do it. That's your
Mm-hmm.
attitude. I,
Mm-hmm.
I really want to do it. I still want to do this thing, but I know I better not because if
Mm-hmm.
I do it, I'm going to get a ticket. I'm going to have some bad things happen to me because of
Yeah.
that. Attitude can only be changed by you and God.
Got it.
Okay. And if you're a writer, attitude can only be changed by your character and you
Mm-hmm.
as the creator of the character.
Mm-hmm.
Behavior can be changed by external forces. You can have all sorts of external forces coming to bear on your character.
For sure.
Attitude can only be changed internally by
Mm-hmm.
you and by the character and by God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's the difference between those two.
Okay.
So we have point of view, attitude, personality, behavior, identification is the next thing. How do you identify? Your character needs to be, you need to identify with the character. You're seeing a character on the screen. This is like, oh, that's exactly my dad does that thing. My mom does that thing. And the bad
Mm-hmm.
thing, of course, is if you're sitting with somebody and you're watching a movie and they look at you and go, man, that's just like you. Isn't that
Yes.
great? Isn't that awful? You're just like that awful, terrible character on the you go, I'm not like that. Yes, you are. That's exactly how you respond.
Yes.
Um, so how do you identify with the character? How does your character identify with the audience?
Mm-hmm.
The next is revelation,
Mm-hmm.
which is what is revealed about the character as they go through the story, as the
Mm-hmm.
character goes through the situation that they're in. What about them is revealed? This is why you need to know your character. This is why you need
Mm-hmm.
to know the character's background. Something in the character's background could be causing them to do something, and then that is revealed as you go along.
Got it.
So it's something and the revelation can happen in a couple of ways. It can be stuff about the character that's revealed to the audience, or it can be stuff that the character learns about themselves. That was
Mm-hmm.
a revelation. I didn't realize I could do that. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know I didn't know that was I. This is a revelation to me. I didn't know that was part of my makeup.
Yeah.
So we got revelation. The next one is action. Character is action, and action is character. Characters have to act. They can't just react.
Got
They
it.
have to act. They have to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Your main character is the person who's doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's not just a person that's reacting to stuff. It's a person who's actually going out and making things happen, good or bad. Good
Mm-hmm.
or bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of John Wayne movies. I used to watch a lot of John Wayne movies. I used to love watching him. And I realized that he gets himself into more trouble. Most of the time, sometimes external forces come in and they do something, but his response to that just makes the situation worse.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes he'll just do something because he's strong-headed and stubborn, and he'll just get into trouble. And that's especially in the comical ones where he's with Maureen O'Hara, and he just,
Yes.
oh, I'm going to do this, and they're going to do that, and they go back and forth in
Super
each other,
reactive.
and it's
Yeah.
hilarious. But you're
Yes.
like, well, if you hadn't just done that, if you hadn't responded that way, if you hadn't did that thing, but that's what characters do. They act,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yep. Yep.
And then the last one is choices.
Okay.
There are many other aspects, but these are the main. I think these are the main eight choices. Choices is a huge part of character, and you've got to give your character. If you're creating characters, they should always be on the horns of a dilemma. They should always be
Mm-hmm.
making choices. I need to do this or this. Which
Mm-hmm.
one? Which one's going to be the
Mm-hmm.
better choice? The
Mm-hmm.
reason is because that's real life. We make dozens upon dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of choices every day. Every
Yeah.
day. Am I going to turn left? Am I going to turn right? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And how many times have we said, oh, I should have done that. If I
Mm-hmm.
had only done that, well, that was a choice and you made the wrong one,
Yeah.
or that
And
may
we
have
learn
been a
from it.
choice and you thought you made the wrong one, but you actually made the right one because later
Mm-hmm.
on it's revealed that if you had made that one, this better thing wouldn't have happened. So,
Yeah.
but you always have to give your characters, put them on the horns of a dilemma. Choices is what really define us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so there's a great quote from one of the Harry Potter books where Harry, I think it's at the end of the second book, where he's saying, it's at the second movie too, where he's wondering if he was the Sorting Hat puts you in your different homes or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and your different houses, and so
Yes.
Harry's in Gryffindor, and
Mm-hmm.
he's wondering if the Sorting Hat put him in the right place after this whole thing because he can speak like snake. He has a partial tongue. He can speak like
Mm-hmm.
snakes, and he can hear different things going on. And he's wondering because a snake is representative of the Slytherins.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And the Slytherins, of course, what was the house of the big bad Voldemort, the villain. And so
Mm-hmm.
Harry's wondering, should I be there? Maybe this Sorting Hat made a mistake. Maybe it
Mm-hmm.
should have put me in Slytherin instead
Mm-hmm.
of Gryffindor. And Dumbledore says to him, "Why do you think it put you in Gryffindor instead of Slytherin?" And Harry says, "Well, because I ask it to."
Mm-hmm.
Dumbledore says, "Exactly, Harry. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. It takes your wishes into consideration." And he says, "You see, Harry, he gave you a choice, and you chose Gryffindor, and it
Mm-hmm.
put you there because of that." And he says, "That's the key. It is not our abilities that define us, Harry. It is our choices.
Mm-hmm.
It is not our abilities that define us. It is our choices. What
Mm-hmm.
we do with those abilities is what defines us." And
Yeah.
I thought that was just wonderful. That's a marvelous way of looking at life. Think about
Mm-hmm.
the choices that you make because that's going to do. It's not just you can be the greatest basketball player, football player, have all these different abilities. You can be a superhero. What we find interesting about superheroes is not necessarily their abilities, what they can do, but the choices that they make in using those abilities. That was what was
Absolutely.
fascinating to me about, I guess we'll go back to popular culture for a minute. That was what was really great about when the conflict, the Civil War conflict that was happening in the Marvel comics,
Mm-hmm.
when you had Captain America against Iron Man,
Right.
and they wisely, it was fun that the creators put that out to everybody else. Whose side are you on?
Right.
Whose side were you on? Were you on Iron Man? Were you Captain America? Iron Man or Captain America? I'm like, there was no question. It's always Captain America.
Team Cap
Always
all the
Captain
way.
America. Cap
Yes.
all the way. And
Yes.
and people will go, why? Why? And then I think Iron Man was great. I said, yeah, you only think Iron Man is great because Robert Downey Jr. plays him funny. He's
Yeah.
funny and he's smart and he's with the snappy comments and stuff. But if you look at the character, if you look at Captain America's character and how
Mm-hmm.
he became Captain America, how Steve Rogers became Captain America, 90-pound weakling, blah blah blah. He gets the formula and then he becomes Captain America. Steve
Mm-hmm.
Rogers, Captain America. The professor, the doctor, the guy who came up with the formula says what the formula does is take what's inside of you and enhances it.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it
Mm-hmm.
more. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, that's the reason you were chosen.
Mm-hmm.
The reason you were chosen is not because you have a lot of muscles and not because of your physical abilities or anything like that. It's because of your heart. It's
Mm-hmm.
because of your decision making. You make the right decisions. It's
Mm-hmm.
because of the choices that you have made. That's the reason why. So if that formula just enhances that, why would I not trust Steve Rogers
Yeah.
over Iron Man,
Yeah.
over Tony Stark, every day and twice on Sundays?
Yeah. That
There would
intrinsic
be a
motivation.
no-brainer. This would be a
Mm-hmm.
no-brainer. You got to trust Steve. You got to trust Captain
Mm-hmm.
America
Yeah. Yeah.
because he's got the best judgment about everything. That's the reason he's one of the leaders. He's got the best judgment about
Mm-hmm.
things. So
Mm-hmm.
that's if you could do that with your characters, you want to give your characters that. Have them make choices and make the choices hard.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from small choices to little. You can't make it easy for your characters. This is a
Mm-hmm.
big mistake I see with a lot of freshman writers, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who are first starting out. They give their characters choices to make, but then they make it easy for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for them.
I'm
Your
thinking
job
of,
is not to make things easy for your characters. Your job is to
yeah.
make things hard for your characters.
Yeah. I'm thinking of two takeaways while I'm listening to you. And one is thinking, acknowledging that every person that I'm speaking with has these things, a point of
Hmm.
view, an attitude, a personality, a behavior, an identification, a revelation, an action, and choices. And like recognizing that when I speak with someone, when I'm having a conversation, when I want to build a relationship, they're representing, in the flesh, those things.
Oh yeah,
Like that
yeah, yeah,
helps me so much. And
yeah.
then the second thing is if ever I'm in an authority type position,
Mhm.
I there's such a strong temptation to remove choices
Yeah.
or to decide choices,
Oh yeah,
you
especially for your
know?
kids. Especially for your
Especially for your
kids.
kids. But talk to us about that. Like good storytelling gives those choices to someone else and a mentor, a mentor is going to be there, but it's somebody
I
else's choice.
I have been beaten up, unbelievably beaten up,
Mm,
from fans who didn't like a certain aspect of the way I was telling a certain story in Adventures in Odyssey.
mm,
They just didn't like it at all. They didn't, like overall, but it was me. I was the lead writer on those things.
mm-hmm,
And my thing was, why are you wanting to mollycoddle the kids?
mm,
Oh, you changed Wit's character. He wouldn't do that. He would never be that. I said,
mm,
you're so wrong. You're
mm-hmm,
so wrong. That's just
mm,
not the case. Wit understands this principle better than anybody else. He understands it,
mm-hmm.
and it's a biblical principle. It's a really profound, deep biblical principle that we're talking about here, not making the choices for your kids,
Yeah.
leaving the choices up to the kids, and when they make the wrong choices, letting them suffer the consequences,
Mm-hmm.
letting them go through it, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what builds them. That's what builds the character in them. Um, and the example that I used to use, I would use the example of the children of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have the Hebrew nation. They're slaves in Egypt. They're begging to be set free, begging to be set free. And so God raises up for them a leader, Moses. Moses says to Pharaoh, "Let my people go,
Mm-hmm.
that they may go into the desert and worship me." Boom. Okay. And Pharaoh says yes, then no, then yes, then no. The plagues come, boom, they go, they leave. Finally, the big bad plague comes, the death of the firstborn comes, and Pharaoh says, "Get out of here.
Yeah.
We're done." Um, so they go through the Red Sea, they go through the whole situation, and they get to the promised land, and uh, Moses says to send out a member of each tribe to go scope out the promised land. What's it
Mm-hmm.
like?
Mm-hmm.
What are we facing? What's going on? So Caleb and Joshua are two of the ones that he sends out, and then 10 others from the other tribes. And Caleb and Joshua come back, and they're like Gimli in 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 the Lord of the Rings when they're fighting at Helm's Deep. It's a great moment in the movie where he and Aragorn sneak out, and they're about to smash that bridge, and they see all the orcs, they're banging against, and Gimli says, "Oh, come on, we can take them."
Yes.
And that's exactly the way Caleb and Joshua are. They're like, oh, come on, yeah,
We can
sure, they're
take them.
big guys, but we can take them. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And the other 10 are like, no, they're too big. They're giants.
Hmm.
They're, yeah, the land is wonderful and beautiful, but they're too big. We'll get slaughtered. We'll get killed. We don't want to. We don't want to. We don't want to. They're going to whine
Hmm.
and complain. We don't want to. And so this goes up to God. Now, what does God, as the parent, do?
Hmm.
What does he do? God doesn't say, you're absolutely right. This is too hard.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Here, let me just wipe them out for you. Or
Hmm.
or better yet, I'll take you back to Egypt because that's a
Hmm.
safer place. You're right. I made a mistake. You're right. Let me just take you back over here. I'll molly. He doesn't mollycoddle them. He
Hmm.
punishes them.
Hmm.
He
Hmm.
punishes them. He sends them off in the desert for 40 years
Yeah.
so that that generation can die out and he can finally get some people in here who will do what they're supposed to do,
Hmm.
what he's designed them to do, what he
Hmm.
wants them to do. You know, uh, God doesn't treat his children with kid gloves.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
we
Yeah.
get into trouble,
Yeah.
bad trouble, and we
Hmm.
pray to get out of it. Oh, we want the Deus ex machina, which is the God machine, to pull us out of the
Yes.
bad trouble. And sometimes that
Yes.
can happen.
Hmm.
Miracles do happen, sure,
Hmm.
miracles happen, but for the most part, the
Yeah.
way God has designed things is, yeah, you get into trouble, you got to face the situation. Now,
Yeah.
I will be here I've already prepared the wonderful ending. Okay, so
Yes.
you can rest assured in that.
Yes.
Already prepared that for you. But
Yeah.
meanwhile, here, you got to go through
Hmm.
this.
Yeah. And that's resiliency. It's
Yeah,
knowing that
yeah,
God's going to be at the end of this story and he's going to be here in between, but his greatest outcome is not my safety, it's my good.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Willing
Hmm.
the good of the other. So
Hmm.
God, as the ultimate love, doesn't
Hmm.
need anything from us.
Hmm.
He didn't need to create the world. He didn't need to
Yeah.
create us. He didn't need to create anything at all.
Hmm.
He has no needs whatsoever. God does not need anything.
Hmm.
So why did he
Hmm.
create? Out of our good,
Yeah.
willing our good, loving us, willing our good.
Hmm.
It's all it's all this outpouring of love,
Hmm.
willing our good,
Hmm.
and knowing, okay, yeah, you're gonna fail. You got to go through this.
Yep.
This is the way this works. This
Yeah.
is what happens. This is the way this works.
Hmm.
You're sinful creatures. I prepared a way out of sin.
Hmm.
I've prepared a way for that to happen.
Hmm.
I will sacrifice myself to myself in order to take on that sin so that you will have that
Hmm.
path. But you're going to have to, it doesn't mean that the hardship is not going to be taken away.
Hmm.
That's what builds the character. And if you know that, you find joy in it.
Yeah.
It's joy in the suffering. It's
Yeah.
joy in the hardships. It's
Hmm.
joy in the terrible, awful times. And you seek them out. What does the Apostle Paul say? In 2 Corinthians 12:10, the Apostle Paul is going through this list of things that have happened to him. I suffered this, I suffered that, I suffered all this stuff, and I got through it. And if
Hmm.
that weren't enough to keep me from boasting, God sent me this terrible thing,
Hmm.
this thorn in the flesh, this awful thing that happened that torments me, this awful thing that happens. And I prayed, I begged God, take it away, take it away,
Hmm.
take it away, 3 times, begging God to take it away. And
Hmm.
God said, my grace is sufficient.
Hmm.
Grace is sufficient unto you.
Hmm.
Oh, my goodness gracious. And then in verse 10, he says, therefore, I take pleasure in hardships, in
Yeah.
infirmities, in anxieties, in bad things, in
Hmm.
things that happen to me, in things that happen to myself. I take pleasure in them.
Hmm.
For when I am weak, then I am strong.
Strong. Yeah.
Oh, wow. When you think about that, that is so profound. That is, we have a tendency to gloss over that.
Hmm.
He's saying, no, I take pleasure in it.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can't wait for bring it on. I can't wait for the hardships because I know God is in control of all this now.
Hmm. Yeah.
Then I am strong. That's the
Yeah.
only way I can be strong,
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
in that. So why would you not rejoice? Yay, yay,
Yeah.
hardships. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Now I talk a good talk. Yeah. I told
Yeah.
you earlier we had this problem with the shower and we had this problem and that problem. And I'm in the
Yes.
midst of everything. Oh, I
Yes.
hate it. It's just
Hmm.
terrible.
Yeah.
But that's the very time when you need to remember those things. That's the very time you
Hmm.
need to remember that aspect of
Yeah.
character,
Hmm.
character and story, and saying, wait a minute, first of all, remember where you are in the story. Okay, this
Mm-hmm.
is not, you're not going to be stuck here forever. Remember where you are in the story. And secondly, it's about your choices. It's about
Yeah.
how you respond. It's about your point of view, your personality, your character, your attitude, your behavior,
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
identification, the revelations. Can you dig deep down and find something that you never knew you had?
Mm-hmm.
And then the actions that you take. What are you going to do here? How are you going to do this? Are you serving? Are you willing the good of the other?
Yeah.
All of those things come into play. That's how story and that's how all of this blends together. All of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff blends together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're identifying this huge element of risk. This
Yeah.
this risk
Yeah.
in a character development and then in our relationships with others. And it's a
Yeah.
necessary thing.
It is a
Yeah.
necessary thing. Risk emotionally and then
Yep.
risk physically.
Mm-hmm.
I just came back a couple of weeks ago from visiting my granddaughter and I love her. She's beautiful. She's 2 years old, 2.5 years old.
What does she
Just
call you?
She calls me granddad. She calls me
Perfect.
granddad, but she's called me
Yay.
a lot of different things. The first thing she called me was granddad buttons because I had buttons on and she was playing with the buttons and she was fascinated with them. And
Yes.
now she calls me granddad penguin walk because I taught her how to walk like a penguin,
That's
you
the
know.
best.
And so she loves that. She loves
Yes.
that. But I see her and I see how she's growing and developing, and I see everything that's going on with her. We were sitting at dinner one night, and she was sitting in her high chair, in her little chair that she has. And on one side, to get into it, her parents had put steps so she
Mm-hmm.
could get in. But on the other side, it's a drop. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing there.
Yep.
Okay. And they have concrete floors. So if she's going to smack, she's going to hit
It's
hard.
gonna hit hard.
And so she decided she wanted to take, she calls her little stuffed kitten Meow. That's what she calls it. So she's going to take Meow and she's going to sit Meow in her chair. But there's really only room for her in the chair. Okay,
Mm.
so I'm sitting here and she's sitting right here,
Mm-hmm.
and she's trying to put Meow in the chair, and I'm looking at her and I'm saying, I think there's only room for you in the chair. But I want Meow in the chair. I said, all right, well, I'm just saying, I don't think there's going to be room. And so she kept scooting over toward the drop-off side, scooting over
Mm.
and scooting over. And I said, I don't think you should do that. You better not do
Mm-hmm.
that. Now, I could have said no. I could have said, I'm just going to take
Mm-hmm.
that. We're going to set that over here. I could have done that because I
Yeah.
knew she was sitting right on the edge and I knew she's going to topple over. She's going to fall.
Yeah.
Okay. And sure enough, boom. Now I was
Mm-hmm.
able to catch her right before she hit the hard concrete because I don't want her busting her head open.
For
But
sure.
scared herself and she
Mm-hmm.
cried and screamed and it was bad. And her parents, fortunately, were like right behind us watching this whole thing.
Yeah.
And so her dad, my son, came over and said, next time you need to listen to granddad. Next time you need to listen to granddad. And I
Yeah.
said, I don't want you to get hurt. The only reason I would do
Mm-hmm.
it. See, now I look at that and I say, okay, that take me out. I want to take me out of it, first of all, but just the
Mm-hmm.
act of that whole
Mm-hmm.
thing is that a microcosm, a tiniest, tiniest, tiniest microcosm of the love that God has for us.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yep.
going to get hurt. You better not do that. You
Mm-hmm.
got choices. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to do that. I'm giving you a choice. You can make the right choice, the wrong choice. You do
Mm-hmm.
that, you're going to get hurt. Okay, all right. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, why did this happen to me? It's so terrible. It's so awful. Why is my life so horrible? God, you don't care about me. No, I didn't. I told you. You got choices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I gave you choices. You have the ability to do this.
Yeah.
That's
And seeing that
that's a
in
great little
relationships.
microcosm of
It's
how
beautiful.
this whole thing works.
Yeah.
What God does for us and what we're supposed to do. And he knows the whole story. He knows the outcome. Just as I knew she's going to fall, she's going to hit her. I knew it. I could see the whole thing. I know the whole timeline going on right here, right in front of me. I can see it
Mm-hmm.
happen. I know she's going to do it. God knows that about us and about everything.
Yeah. Absolutely.
About everything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's what's wonderful
Yeah.
about him.
I
So
love that.
anyway, that's what story does for us, I think.
It does. So simple stories jump to the moral really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes as faith-based mentors, we have this temptation to jump to the moral in our
Mhm.
conversations too fast. And
Yeah.
so as a storyteller, how do you keep from jumping to the end of the story and skipping that growth? And what can we learn from that as
Yeah,
Christians?
I think that going through it is value in the process. You have to go through it, the value
Because
in the
now your
process.
little girl knows,
She knows.
you
She knows
know,
that I'm
in a
not going to
different
do that
way.
again. Not going to do
Yeah.
that again. That's that.
Yeah.
And if I had protected her from that, she wouldn't. She
Yeah.
wouldn't know
So
that.
value the
And so
process.
it could be even worse next time. She could take a real
Yeah.
tumble down something that was really dangerous because she didn't
Right.
understand this. So the value if there's value in the process,
Mm-hmm.
you may have the ability to skip to the end. Okay. You may have the ability to say, I know all this. I'm going to skip to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's value in it. This took me a long time because
Yeah.
I would do that frequently. I'll skip over all that. I don't need that. I'm just going to get to the end.
Hmm.
No. And when I went back to school, I went back to school in my 40s. I went back to school and I went to a community college to get undergrad stuff,
Hmm.
lower division stuff out of the way. Then you test in when you're in high school. You have your SATs, but
Hmm.
when you're that age, the
Yes.
SATs have long
Like, what do
since
we do with
disappeared.
you?
I have no idea. But they have a way for you to actually test
Yeah.
in. So I was testing into everything. They said, okay, well, you can enter into this subject here.
Hmm.
You don't have to take all those preliminary courses. You can do it here. And I said, I know that I've tested so that I can. I'm going to go back
Hmm.
and do that anyway.
Mm.
I'm going to go back and start. So the very first math class that I had, for instance, was, the the teacher drew a line and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and -1, -2 through 5. This is a
Fantastic.
number line.
Yeah.
This is how we do numbers. It was very, very basic stuff. And of course it was accelerated because we're older and we can take stuff in
Hmm.
fast. But this was stuff that kindergartners were
Hmm.
you know. And I said the reason why is because I don't want to cheat it. There's value in the process. There's
Hmm.
value in learning all of this. I need to go through all of this because I don't think I'm going to be able, even though I could skip ahead, I don't think I'm going to have the background to know more advanced concepts unless I do this.
Yeah.
I need to do this. Even though I know it, I
Hmm.
need to do this. There may be something in here that I'm not knowing that I'm going to need later on. And that's why we go through that. We go through the bogs. It'd be great to just skip over to do the mountaintop to mountaintop to mountaintop. We need to go through the bogs. We need to go
Hmm.
through it. That there's value. There's value in the process. We need to go through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Uh, your stories, Phil, are biblically based, they're grounded, and yet they're not at all what I would call preachy. How have you cultivated that in your stories? And
Yeah.
what can we learn if we want to be accessible and safe and truth-filled without filling every conversation with, I call them preaching prayers, where somebody's like, let's pray, and it's really just a preaching moment,
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
prayer. Like
Yeah.
how do we apply that to our relationships?
Um, I think one way to do that is C.S. Lewis said, we don't need more Christian writers. What we need are more writers who are Christians who write about everything.
Yeah.
And I interpret that as him meaning, you shouldn't be, if you're doing what you're supposed to do from a faith standpoint in your life, if you're in prayer, if you're worshiping God, if you're communing with other people and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing there, you shouldn't worry if those values you shouldn't worry about putting those values in your stories because they're just going to show up
Hmm.
anyway. That's part of who
Hmm.
you are. If you
Mm-hmm.
if you make your relationship with God part of who you are, your Christianity becomes part of your character, who you are,
Mm-hmm.
then it'll show up in your writing without ever having to include chapter and verse.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to include chapter and verse. You don't have to include. You make it so that your characters exemplify these values, these things that are important, just in their daily lives, and then have other characters see how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're why are you doing that? Because it's the
Mm-hmm.
right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we do. And 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 then the character that'll lead to questions, but from the other character that'll lead to other questions. And they'll interpret it however they want to interpret it, whatever they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with putting scripture in, quoting scripture, having characters that quote scripture,
For sure.
as long as it rises organically out of the needs of the story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A better way, who was it? I don't remember who it was. It's a very famous, maybe it's Charles Spurgeon or somebody who said something to the effect, I'm going to mess this quote up, but it's something to the effect of, um, we should spend every moment of the day evangelizing people and use as few words as possible to do so.
Mm-hmm.
They should see it by our character. They should see it by the way we interact with each other. They
Mm-hmm.
should see it by how we live our lives.
Mm-hmm.
They should see it.
Yeah.
And it's been brought to my attention recently by listening to people who I really respect and really talk to and really listen to their podcasts and whatnot, that that means uh, what we've lost in modernity over the years is how weird Christianity is. And we should embrace the weirdness. I mean,
Yeah.
we should embrace the weirdness.
Yeah.
The last
Yeah,
shall be
Paul calls
first.
us a peculiar people.
Yeah,
Just be a little peculiar.
look at the teachings of Jesus. The last shall
Yeah.
be first.
Mm-hmm.
The greatest among you shall be the least among you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not the world doesn't look at that. What are you talking about? That's not
Mm-hmm.
no. The greatest among you is the greatest among you.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one who could do the most. It's the one who's this. What is that? No, no. Servant leader, being a servant leadership. Jesus washing the feet of the disciples,
Mm-hmm.
and and Peter saying, "What are you doing? You're
Mm-hmm.
washing my feet. I'm going to wash your feet." No, no, you can't wash my feet. Don't you? No, I would never allow that to happen. No, no.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, I am your rabbi. I am the
Mm-hmm.
Messiah. I am your boss. And I'm telling you, I'm washing your feet. Okay. Unless I wash your feet, you can have no part. Oh, then wash everything. No, 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 no. Okay. So it's the weirdness of it's the weirdness of um, the thing you value the most, you must give away in order to
Mm-hmm.
get more of it.
Mm-hmm.
Love. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the love of God, willing the good of the other. Again, willing the good of the other.
Yeah.
And you only get more love by giving yours away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's just
Yeah.
a strange, strange thing. That's really weird if you think about it. A lot of the basic tenets of Christianity, God dying on a
Mm-hmm.
cross
Mm-hmm.
for the only reason, and people are, atheists are perplexed by this. I mean, if you go
Mm-hmm.
down that route with them, they'll say, why in the world would he do that?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you believe in such a weird thing as somebody who's
Mm-hmm.
completely innocent taking on all of this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
For what?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the whole point.
Yeah.
So um, uh, uh, you know, uh, that's what we need to remember about what we do as writers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we're creating stories and we're creating stories with characters in them, those characters are all, and the situations that you're going to write are all going to reflect your deepest held beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
no matter who
Mm-hmm.
you are. And great great theologians have said, recent theologians, that everybody has a God.
Yeah.
Even the most ardent atheist has a God somewhere. God is the court of last appeal, the court of highest appeal. That if you think that if that's the state,
Mm-hmm.
then the state is your God. If it's popularity, the will of the people, the demos, then that's your God. If it's
Yeah.
science, then that's your God,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to show up in your writing. It's a necessary thing. It's going to have to. It's going
Yeah.
to have to show up in your writing. So don't worry about putting those things in your writing,
Mm-hmm.
consciously putting those things in your writing. Worry more about living a Christian life,
Mm-hmm.
making
Mm-hmm.
that part of who you are, making that part of you who you
Yeah.
are. Those characters, all that, those 8 characteristics of personality,
Yeah.
of a character. Put that in every one of them. Put that
Yeah.
in every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you write stuff, you should never worry about the Christianity showing up, because it's going to be there no matter what.
Yeah.
It's just
And
going to automatically be there.
what a beautiful spiritual exercise it would be to take those aspects of character
Yeah.
and go have a date with God and say, "Hey God, what's my point of view here?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
I express that? What's
That should
my
be a constant thing.
attitude?
That should,
What's
not
my
just a day,
behavior?"
not
Hmm.
just a day with God. That should be a
Yeah,
constant. We should be. That's what
absolutely.
I think. That's what Paul meant by pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
I think that's what this is a constant conversation. What's my point of view here?
Hmm.
How am I supposed to look at this?
Hmm.
What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to behave right now?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to be doing here? What action do I need to take? What is my behavior? What
Hmm.
what do I need to identify with, and what do I need to not identify with? What
Hmm.
choice do I need to make here? All of those things should be a constant conversation that you're having with
Hmm.
God.
Yeah.
Okay, uh, then you take all of that and you apply it to story. You put it in your stories. It's going to be in your stories no matter what. That's what makes the stories stand the test of time. That's what makes the stories work.
Hmm.
Um, um, and that's what keeps them from being preachy.
Yeah.
That's what keeps them from you from pigeon jamming, you know, jamming in a
Mm-hmm.
sermon into the middle
Mm-hmm.
of the story.
Yeah.
Concentrate instead, once you do that, once you're there, concentrate instead on telling a good story.
Mm-hmm.
Learn what a good story is and do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell a good story. Understand who's your protagonist? What's the dramatic need? What's the dramatic situation? Those
Mm-hmm.
three questions. That's
Mm-hmm.
the basis of all your stories. And
Yeah.
then tell a good story.
Mm-hmm.
And your values, whatever you value most, they're going to automatically show up in that story
Yeah.
somewhere.
I hear you talking about authenticity, that,
Yeah.
when I'm authentic, that's going to come out.
Yeah.
And if I'm inauthentic, it's going to be preachy.
We can all tell too. We
Hmm.
can all tell. I mean, I'm sure that we've all seen stories where suddenly something happens and it's like, why did that happen?
Yeah.
Why did that happen?
Hmm.
We were watching something. My wife and I were watching something last night, and they had a whole scene that they have this ongoing story arc. It's a doctor who's taking care of a patient, and in the previous episode, this man patient had some severe problem, and the doctor told him, "Look, you can't work.
Mm.
Right? I'm going to make it so you can't work. I'll order you to stay home."
Yeah.
And so this guy didn't like it. He went to another doctor. This other doctor's a scam artist, and this other doctor's going to make it so that he can work.
Hmm.
So the first doctor in the first episode took some tests. He did blood tests and whatnot. He sent it off to the lab. He came back, and he's on the phone. Oh, uh, 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 his wife comes in and tells him that the lab is on the phone and they want to talk to you about this patient's tests.
Ah.
And so, but but that patient, uh, something else was going on, and basically, he goes in. The doctor goes in, and the next scene you see the doctor's on the phone. He says, "Okay, well, thank you. Let me know as soon as you know." And he hangs up, and the wife comes in and says, "Well, what was the test results?" And he says, "Well, they haven't finished them fully yet. They haven't completed them yet. Then they'll let me know it doesn't look good, but they don't know yet completely." And I'm like, "Why did you do that
Interesting.
scene?" Well,
Interesting.
the only reason that they did that scene, the only reason that she came in and said the lab is on the phone is because they needed to get him out of the room. They needed to get the doctor out of the room because there was
Mm.
another character that was coming in and they had to deal with another story beat. I
Hmm.
look at that and say, that was just a stupid story beat. That was just a terrible story
Hmm.
beat. That you didn't come up with a better way of telling that story. Come up with a better
Hmm.
way of
Get him out of
of
the
that
room
doctor
in a
getting out
different
of the
way.
room because it was
Yeah.
useless. It was just a
Hmm.
waste of screen time that you just did, of story time that you just did to have him go in and not have the results of the test when they're calling about the results of the tests. Don't
Hmm.
so it's stuff like that
Yeah.
where everybody you can see it. You can look at a story. Sometimes it's glaring, and that means that what that is it's not problems arising out of organically out of the needs of the story. That means the writer wants something to happen.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
writer's shoehorning something in there that just that they want to happen.
Yeah.
And you'll see that a lot in stories. You'll see
Hmm.
stuff that happens where the scene just doesn't seem to make sense.
Hmm.
And you realize, okay, well, that's the writer or the director or the producer or somebody just wanted that scene in there. They wanted this thing to happen. And
Hmm.
so that's them wanting to make it happen instead of it happening naturally,
That makes
organically.
sense. That makes sense.
Um,
Relationally, I think of it as open-handed living.
yeah,
Like I want to be fully present, fully available, fully here, but and then open-handed. But when something else swaps out, we
right,
can do that.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Phil, you've been so generous with your time. Do you have time for one more question?
One more, one
Okay,
more.
sounds good. Well, we should make it an adventure is an Odyssey question.
Okay, all right.
So, are your goals and desires for Adventures in Odyssey the same as they were in the beginning? And if not, what has changed and why? I'm curious because you've been a part of this for so long and you have that mentor's heart.
Yeah, I think they're the same. I mean, everything change is inevitable. Um, it really, as far as the basic thing is concerned, it's just to tell a good story. Great story is well
Mm-hmm.
told.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell a good story, tell it well, do a great story, tell it well. As far as other smaller, or different things that are more involved in the day-to-day telling of the stories and the characters, yeah, there's some things that I kind of look at and go, I think maybe I've changed a few in the way I look at stuff. I think I've
Hmm.
changed more in just attitude about how the show is written more
Mm.
than anything else.
Hmm.
Um, I've really tried lately. Well, I was with Odyssey. I did for about 14, it's his first 14 or 15 years, and then I took a long break,
Hmm.
and then I came back about 10 or 11 years ago.
Hmm.
And since I came back, one of the things that I really wanted to work on was the idea of of the team doing things
Mm.
instead of focusing so much on I wrote that show. It's more
Hmm.
of we're writing this whole thing together.
Mm.
And I'm a terrible judge as to whether that's resulted in good stuff or bad stuff, or been better or worse, or how it works. Um, I'll let the audiences decide on that.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to try to cultivate the team, much more of a of uh, team mentality in for me,
I love that.
more than anything else. And if you've ever been to the Reagan Library out in California, you should go to the
Mhm.
Reagan Library. It's a wonderful place. There's a mock-up of the Oval Office
Hmm.
as Reagan had it, and on his desk, is a plaque that says, "There's no end to what a man can accomplish if he doesn't care who gets the credit for it."
Hmm.
And I thought
Wise words.
that's a great way to look at stuff. Don't be so worried about who gets the credit for stuff, and just go and make the
Yeah.
best shows that you can possibly make.
Hmm.
And that hasn't changed. I've always wanted to do that, but I think my approach has changed to
Hmm.
that. Now, as far as the goals for Odyssey, um, itself, yeah, sure. I mean, I think I don't know that we had any goals for the series itself except to just keep going.
Hmm.
more than more than anything else, just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's certainly how God has blessed it as far as that's concerned. That's been wonderful.
Yeah.
And then also I think just just the just to try to help um, people understand what the show is, new
Hmm.
writers to understand what the show is, and then try to help them with their story development and the story writing process and things like that, which is why I teach.
Yeah.
That's the teaching part of it. Again, that meets with mixed success, I'm sure. If you can just it's the same thing as teaching Bible. It's the same thing as teaching anything, which is if you can just uh, I know it can be ponderous to hear this stuff. I know that doing these kinds of really deep stuff into the academic side of writing or the academic side of Christianity, of
Hmm.
philosophy, of morals, of anything can get very ponderous and tedious and whatnot. But if it just can embed somewhere
Yeah.
in there,
Hmm.
then sooner or later you're going to be at a point someday where you're going to go, "Oh, I remember that thing. Yeah, that'll help me in this situation."
Yeah.
Um, it's happened to me over and over and over again. I I think the big thing is just to tell stories that are worthwhile,
Hmm.
that are worth something,
Hmm.
and that people can get something out of. And we just had the 1,000th episode celebration this past summer, which is
Congratulations.
amazing. Yeah, that was. But the thing that comes out of it, as it always does, same thing happened when we did a 30th anniversary cruise on a
Hmm.
Disney ship and everything, and then we did this 1,000th celebration. It's great to meet the people and hear hear the effect of the stories on them.
Yeah.
Hear what they. So many people come up and say, "This is, you were the only friend I had, and when I was growing up, you know."
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
you all don't understand your impact. You all
Hmm.
don't understand what you've done for me, and
Hmm.
then and this was over and over again. People would say this. You don't understand what you've done for me, what you continue to do for me. This is why I keep
Yeah.
listening after all these years. I keep listening to this because there's
Yeah.
always something I can get out of it. There's always something new I can get out of it. Uh,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
I think is something that we always tried to put in from the very beginning. One of the things just on a pragmatic level was that I had as a goal for the show. There are two things that I remember distinctly was I called it the Warner Brothers cartoon approach to these shows, which is if you watch the old Bugs Bunny and all those the great classic cartoons from the 30s and 40s that they would show at the beginning of movies in theaters for an adult audience, you had something in it for everybody. So little kids loved
Mm,
the colorful characters and the wackiness and the slapstick and this and that and banging and whatnot. And then you get a little bit older and you realize, oh, there's a joke there for a little bit older kids too. A
mm-hmm.
little bit older as a teenager. Oh, there's all sorts of new things that open up. And then as an adult, you can still get pleasure out of them. You can still see the jokes because there's all sorts of jokes in there. So they put something in for everybody, all
Mm-hmm.
ages. And so even though Adventures in Odyssey was targeted for 9 to 12 year olds, junior hires, basically, I insisted, and everybody I think caught that vision too, which was to put something in there for everybody. I thought,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, if we target it for this audience, the second biggest audience that we're going to get by default is the parents,
Yes.
because kids listen to it and they're going to listen to it over, and if they like it, they're going to listen to
Yes.
it over and over and over again. So we might as well put stuff in there that entertains the parents too,
Yes.
and it worked. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the parents started saying, "Hey, I really like these shows," and then their younger brothers and sisters, and then where we kind of lose everybody is in the teen years where they kind of go off and do their own thing. But then we discovered, no, there's just a bunch of closet listeners.
Yes.
They
They're still there.
just don't want everybody to know that they still listen, but they still listen. And then we pick them back up again when they start becoming, young adults. But so that was one thing that I really wanted to make sure that we did in terms of telling story. Put something in there for all ages. Let's make sure everything happened. And then the other was really strictly just a practical, pragmatic thing, and that was can we improve on the art form of audio drama?
Mm,
Can we make audio drama sound better? Can we make it? What can we do
yeah.
to improve on the art form of audio drama? And I think that's also happened, I think,
Hmm.
really well because of increases in technology, sure, but I think it's also a mindset. I think it's just Dave Arnold was great at that. I mean, he was right from the two, or Bob Luttrell and Dave Arnold. Bob was more old school. Dave was
Hmm.
coming at it from the new angle, and the two of them together really did enhance this art form now, that side of it, and inspired the guys that we have now who've taken it even
For sure.
further.
Hmm.
And I think it's my favorite form of storytelling. I've written books,
Yeah.
I've written for television, I've written films, I've written plays. I like writing all of those things. I love writing all of those things. But
Hmm.
audio drama is my favorite form of storytelling because you have to be active.
Hmm.
We're going to supply a great soundtrack for you, but you get to supply the pictures in your head. You get to
Yes.
supply, and you
There's
have to be
scope for
part
the
of it. You have to really
imagination.
listen to it. You have to be an active listener and listen to it.
Yeah.
And it forces you to be part of the story. So,
Hmm.
um, so that's
Hmm.
that's what I love about it.
I
That
love it.
hasn't changed at all.
Absolutely. I love that. And my favorite thing as I'm hearing you talk about it is that it hasn't changed at all and
Yeah.
that you're still sharpening that saw, you're still honing your skills, you're still growing and developing and then figuring out how to pass that on to the next
There's
generation.
so much to learn. There's still so
Hmm.
much to learn.
Hmm.
Every day
Yeah.
I start investigating new things and I'm like, oh man, I hadn't thought about that before. I hadn't thought
Yes.
about that. And I'm trying
Yes.
to develop new courses and
It's out
new
there.
ways to
Hmm.
teach things and new ways to do stuff. And there's so much more to learn. I mean,
Hmm.
always, you
Hmm.
never stop learning on this stuff.
Yeah.
You never stop learning, which is wonderful.
Phil, after this conversation, how do we connect with you? How do we keep in touch with what you're crafting and creating and learning?
Well, you know how to keep in touch with
Yes,
me,
it's
but
true.
but everybody else, if they want to, you can have. I'll give you my email address, which is just phil.lawler@gmail.com. And if
Okay.
anybody wants to contact me, they can certainly contact me
Yeah. Thank
there.
you.
Email
Yeah.
is a great way to do that.
Hmm.
So yeah, go
Hmm.
ahead and contact me there, and
Yeah.
um, and
And you're
I
always a Google away. See what
I'm
you're up
always a
to
Google
most
away.
recently.
Always a Google away.
I
And
love it.
hopefully I've got a podcast that I'm trying to prepare now about this stuff called Story is Everything, and I really would love to um, interview you and interview other people I've got a list of people that I'm really hoping that I can interview. We can talk. We'd have conversations like this that talk about story. I've had some wonderful dinners lately with people that I really admire that would just, wow, this should be on my podcast. This is exactly what
Hmm.
I want to do. for the podcast. So I'm trying to get that all together. It's
Do it. I guarantee you, I will be your first subscribe.
time is a precious commodity.
Well, we are so grateful that you took this time with us, Phil, and I cannot wait to hear, as people hear this conversation and as it inspires deeper conversations and better relationships, the things that will result. So we're super grateful for you.